Well, for some analysis now, let's bring in Todd L. He's a professor of political management at George Washington University. Thank you so much for being with us here at France 24. Let's just begin with what your thoughts are on that interview.
Thanks. It's great to be with you again. Appreciate you having me on. Certainly, this was the big moment that we've been waiting for so far, since Kamala Harris has really dodged the press. She hasn't been giving any interviews or doing any press conferences. And we come out of the DNC, the convention, wondering just exactly what does she stand for, because she's spoken in such generalities. She's talked about this opportunity economy. She's talked about being strong against our adversaries internationally, but hasn't really put the meat on the bones of exactly what her policies would be. She had an opportunity to do that, and I think she did it a little bit, but not clearly as much as she should. I think that that is strategic, because the more you talk about policy details, the more people are able to perceive what they're going to lose in those policy details, and it can cost you votes.
And the elections are still some time away in November, but now that both the Republican and Democratic conventions have wrapped up, as you mentioned, how would you say the parties and their candidates are faring ahead of the election so far?
Right. It's strange here in the United States that we have such a very, very long campaign compared to other nations. But 2 months isn't very long in our general election history. We usually consider the kickoff of the campaign to be the Labor Day weekend, which we are in right now. And right now, Kamala Harris is gaining. In all the polls we're seeing, she's pulled to about 5 percentage points nationally. And in the swing states, she's exceeded the margin of error in terms of pulling ahead of Donald Trump in some of those northern states like Wisconsin and Michigan, which are absolutely crucial for her to win. She's pulled a little bit ahead in Pennsylvania. If she takes those three states, she'll probably win. On the other hand, we see Donald Trump, who is really scrambling. He's trying to make sure that he doesn't lose anymore, and he really wants to change things around. We saw last week that he tried to make a ploy for some veterans votes by going to the Arlington ceremony, but that sort of blew up in his face because he wasn't supposed to be recording there. He's been trying to attack Kamala, but he hasn't found the right line of attack against her yet that's really resonating with voters.
And staying on the same note, Harris has, obviously surged in the polls since becoming the Democratic candidate, as you said. And she's really managed to shore up support and donations. But now the question is, can she maintain the momentum, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really crucial that she does. Of course, the groups where she's really been increasing in terms of her numbers are with young voters and voters of color. And those were exactly the groups that Joe Biden was really struggling with. And by the way, were the groups that really helped him win the White House back in 2020. Now she needs to maintain them. She's got the energy, she's got the momentum, but she needs to continue that. She has the money to do the advertising. She needs to make sure that she's able to talk strategically about that. We saw her try to have things both ways on the Israel issue. She knows that she doesn't want to alienate certain groups, especially young people for whom that is a big issue. But she's got a tremendous money advantage right now. It's about 5-1. And she's going to put that in states that she doesn't need, but Donald Trump absolutely has to have to win, like North Carolina and Georgia. So right now, I would say that the Harris campaign's on the offensive and the Trump campaign's on the defensive.
Right, and let's talk about Donald Trump a little bit, because, after the assassination attempt in July, he really seemed like he had the wind in his sails, but that fizzled a bit after Harris's nomination. Is there a possibility for him and the Republicans to stage a strong comeback?
It's always possible. We never say never in politics. In fact, we have a saying in the United States called the October surprise, which is something that happens in October right before the election that can swing things one way or another. We saw that Hillary Clinton was leading Donald Trump pretty significantly, and then we had the James Comey reopen the investigation into her emails, and then in the last week, the undecideds broke 2-1 for Donald Trump. There's not a whole lot of undecideds anymore, though. You've got Donald Trump. People know who he is. They had 4 years of his governance. You have somebody like Kamala Harris, who really hasn't said what she is, trying to pick and choose what she wants from the Biden administration, certainly the most popular points. And, we're going to see that, what I'm saying is there's fewer voters to push one way or another. So the likelihood of a comeback, it's not out of reach, but it's going to be difficult.
All right. And there are so many pressing issues on the agenda at the moment, obviously, from the war in Gaza and Ukraine to domestic policies as well. What are some of the key issues on voters' minds in this election?
Right. It's always the economy. The economy is always the number one issue in every single election, and that's absolutely the case this time around. We see Harris trying to take claim for the low unemployment and the growth rate, which has been good, and not talk so much about inflation. She is acknowledging that there is inflation, and she wants to bring down the price of things like groceries and housing. But the issue of inflation always works to Republicans' favor. If we ask people who do they trust more with inflation, they usually say the Republicans. And right now they're saying Donald Trump on that issue. So that's going to be number one. And then you have these other issues, as what we call them ancillary issues, that each side's going to try to push to try to get those middle of the road voters and also to activate their base to make sure they show up. For Democrats, abortion has been a big winner in the past two election cycles. Expect them to really lean hard into that. And they'll also talk about the threat that Donald Trump is to democracy. For the Republicans, they're going to lean hard into crime and immigration. Those are things that really catapulted Donald Trump to the presidency in 2016. He hasn't given that up as his signature issue. Of course, build the wall was his motto. We'll see him lean into those two as well.